This is garter stitch. This is ribbing. This is stockinette. So why am I so excited? Because sometimes the most basic stitches are hiding something very sneaky. I think I've fallen down a structural rabbit hole. Fair. I didn't set out to make this particular video. I was just browsing patterns, as one does, and I kept stopping on designs that didn't look particularly flashy, but something about them made me go, wait, that's clever. They weren't complicated or showy, just clever. And I realized what I was responding to wasn't fancy stitch patterns. It was the decisions underneath, the designer's decisions, weird little construction moves that most people probably wouldn't even notice. Yes, we are, Oscar. So today I want to show you 4 patterns that at first glance look relatively simple, but when you start reading the pattern, you realize the designer knew exactly what they were doing. In case this is your first time joining me for this kind of video, this is a series that I call the Knit List, where I take a small number of patterns, 4 or 5, sometimes 6 if I'm feeling really ambitious, and do a really deep dive into that pattern. What attracted me to it, info about the designer, all about all the detailed aspects of the yarn and the construction and what modifications I might make, and really share all of the little nerdy things that make me me and get me excited about particular patterns. And in case you're wondering if I ever knit any of them, this one is the Joinery by Yumiko Alexander. This, I believe, was in Knit List Volume 1, and I wear this to death. I love this so much. I'm tempted to knit a second one, which is something I, as a rule, don't do. So today we're on Knit List Volume 5, and we are looking at patterns that I feel are incredibly smart, clever, and structurally really interesting and kind of sneaky. So let's start by diving into pattern number 1, which is the Immersion Wrap by Ruthman Designs. It's garter, it's rib, it's marled yarn, nothing wild. But then I started reading the details. We'll get all into it with the pattern, but first let's check out some information about this designer because he's new to me. Andreas Ruthman lives in Germany. His mom taught him to knit in the 1980s. He worked at advertising and design agencies. He describes himself as a think outside the box kind of guy. That's not really a quote, but I'm paraphrasing. He started publishing in 2023 and currently has 20 designs available on Ravelry. And I must say, I really, really like his design aesthetics. Check out these cool designs. But today we're going to focus on the Immersion Wrap. This pattern was published in December 2024. It currently has 15 projects and is in 75 queues. The yarn weight it calls for is DK. He says preferably non-superwash or the equivalent made up of marled finer weight fibers. He actually held 6 fine lace weight strands together for the yarn he used for his sample. And holding 6 strands together, Yes, there's lots of color depth for sure, but it also builds body, which changes how the fabric behaves. And for this particular piece, it's very important. And that's going to bring us to the construction and the silhouette. This design is knit at a firm gauge on purpose. And the pattern specifically says not to wash or block it, which to me is almost rebellious, because what do? We block everything. We soak everything. We block to improve everything, but not this. Here, the firmness is the structure. The density is what makes it sculptural. Without it, those cool pleats are going to turn to mush. So what you see is what you get. Garter pleats, a span of tight rib, garter pleats with short rows, a span of tight rib, and garter pleats again. The sections can really be however long you want, but the whole thing turns into this really cool drape over your shoulders and stay put kind of shawl. Apparently, Andreas designed it because he wanted a shawl to wear while doing yoga that would stay on his shoulders and not move around. And I just felt like this was such a clever and interesting way to do that. So if I knit this, and I very well might, what modifications would I do? Zero, aside from the color. I'm really not a huge fan of the reds and blues he's marled together here. It's just not my vibe. He suggested either sport or DK weight non-superwash merino, and the whole thing takes about 800 meters. I happen to have in my stash 2 yarns that I felt I could marl together that would look very much more me. And those are this Olan Miara, which is non-superwash fine merino, and Hedgehog Fibers Skinny Singles, which is also 100% merino. Gentle hand wash, so again, non-superwash. I thought these 2 yarns would pair together quite nicely. I did a little micro swatch, and here's what we get. Now, you've got to admit, that is totally Nicole Blue. If a little heavy to the green side, still, I love it, and I can definitely see myself with this cool pleated shawl in this colorway draped around my shoulders. It's not a super long pattern. There's really only 2 pages of actual instruction involved and tons of detailed photographs, which is really nice. The pattern costs €8, which is about 13.5 Canadian dollars, and it's available in English, Danish, and German. I don't generally love knitting at a super dense gauge, but I think I'm going to cast on and do a chunk of the pleats just to see how it goes. If I really hate it, the rest of it might not happen, but I really want to get a look at those garter pleats in my gorgeous marled colorway. I have curiosity. Next up is the Lacey Loop Tee by Other Loops. This pattern is a really subtle overachiever. It's one color, garter, eyelets, drop shoulder, textured stripes made with pearls. It would be really easy for this design to feel basic, but when you start seeing stuff, which we will, it's unbelievable. First, we'll talk about the designer. The reason this pattern is here today is because my friend Erica, who I meet with weekly on a Zoom call, is currently knitting this, and I was just instantly taken with it. And then when I got the pattern and looked more deeply into it, the more and more impressed I became with this particular design. Behind the brand Other Loops, you meet Maya Klovdal, who has a degree as a fashion designer from the design school Kolding in Denmark. Since she got her education, Maya made a career in the fashion industry. She's worked for several well-known Danish fashion brands. She started posting designs on Ravelry in 2022 and already has 67 designs there. If you have seen a pattern with loop in the name, it's probably hers. She focuses on cables, textures, horizontal lines, both in some colored stripes and all defined by stitches. Her most knit patterns are the Brady loop sweater, the twist loop top, the twist loop sweater, the tulip loop sweater, and the Lacey Loop Tee, which is my next pick. First, let's check out the construction. The back is shaped with short rows right at the beginning, which means you're not getting a front neckline strangle that can happen with this bandeau neck style. The shoulders are worked separately and then joined. So again, it's not just a rectangular slab pretending to be a garment. And the hem, that deep rib framed with eyelets and garter, just gives me the architectural vibes that I love so much. The neckline is finished with double knitting and an Italian bind off. So much polish. Yeah, it looks sophisticated, and that's what gets me. It's using very simple stitches, but the finishing decisions elevate the whole thing. It's restrained, and restraint is hard to pull off. The pattern calls for 2 strands of Knitting for Olive pure silk or a DK weight alternative. This is what Knitting for Olive pure silk is like. So it's designed for something fairly light, obviously inelastic, so no stretch in the yarn itself, and quite drapey. I have a bunch of this, but it's set aside for a different project, and it's not my color. It's a loose 2-ply twist, and it's quite fine. After searching for the right or best blend, I landed on Sandnes Garn Lina. Lina is a cotton, viscose, and linen blend, and I have used the variation of Lina before called Tin Lina to make this tee, and it's really, really lovely. A little bit of sheen, very drapey, unbelievably comfortable to wear. This was crazy tedious to knit in this wee tiny little gauge, but lucky for me, Tin Lina's big sister, Lina, which is listed on both Ravelry and Yarn Sub as worsted, but it's right on the cusp between a DK and a worsted because it knits to 20 stitches on a 4mm needle, which is the pattern's gauge. I was sold. So I already ordered and received this olive green color from my pal Smita at Your Next Knit, which is an online yarn shop located in the Vancouver area. Very worthy of a click and a browse. The link to Your Next Knit is always down in my description box. And yes, I bought new yarn. Don't judge me. I also took a few minutes because I was so excited when this yarn came to make up myself a little swatch of the stitches in this particular design. The drape is absolutely perfect. The eyelets look fantastic. The definition is really good. I just think this is like 100% a winner. And looking at it, you can see that it's really pretty structurally identical to the pure silk. If you held two strands of this together, I say you get that. So this pattern isn't on my spreadsheet for this year, but I think I'm going to add it because I really want to have this tee for this summer. The instructions look like they're really good. My only knock would be is it's a lot of dense information jammed into a single page. Personally, I prefer my instructions spread out a bit more. I know it's more printing, but for me, it just makes it easier to find exactly what I'm looking for. Otherwise, there's lots of detail in here. It's very well written. And she's even bolded some key areas where I would normally grab a highlighter and make sure those things are highlighted. So she's already done that work for me. Impressed. The price is 60 Danish krone, which is about $13.50 Canadian. Kind of exactly the same price the Immersion was. Go figure. And it's available in 6 languages: English, Danish, French, German, Norwegian, and Swedish. Wow. Wow isn't a language. That's me being impressed by all the languages. Now, pattern number 3, which is called The Author by Jared Flood. There was actually a little bit of spicy controversy in the comments on this pattern, which surprised me a bit. So I'm going to go into a fair bit of detail about this one because I really feel like I want to defend this pattern a bit, or at least make people understand why it is what it is. Now, at first glance, this looks pretty much like a classic cardigan. Kind of neutral, cozy, nothing shouting for attention, aside from maybe the thick shawl collar. But like the others, the more I dug into this one, the more fascinated I became. Here's what's included in this basic cardigan: waist darts, back neck shaping, short row curved hem, a deep raglan with dramatically tapered sleeves, a double layered button band with hidden buttonholes. That's tailoring. It's giving, this is going to sit properly on a body. And that curved hem, it prevents that awkward straight across line that sometimes makes this style of oversized cardigan feel boxy. And there are not one, but 2 schematics posted on the pattern info page. It gets huge points for that. Being able to see the finished measurements is priceless. This pattern has a huge size range, which is great, but doesn't always mean that it's thoughtfully graded in the larger sizes. But this one, amazing. First, there are classic and tall options for both the body length and the sleeve length. You can notice here on the body length measurement, it actually goes down for the larger sizes, which is maintaining the cool proportions of this sweater. I'm so impressed by this because my big question was, as much as I love the shape of this sweater, what's it going to look like on my plus size body? That's where we dive into the finished projects. 1 year after publication, there are only 29 projects, and I didn't see any larger than a size 5. And those garments aren't shown modeled on a person. I feel like Brooklyn Tweed did itself a disservice by not getting larger sizes knit and modeled. So I can't tell from the projects how this would look on me, but I did learn a lot by reading through the notes of those who have already knit this. I understand why this pattern hasn't gotten the uptake I think it deserves. We'll look at that in a little bit after we talk about the yarn. This pattern was designed for a woolly worsted wool. There are options for 3 different yarns in the pattern, but they are all Brooklyn tweed. And sadly, Brooklyn tweed is no longer in the yarn business. So we need to look at subs. And as you know, if you saw my video about mohair alternatives, I can't really do sheep wool at my neck, with the exception of extra fine merino. But this pattern needs something more lofty than a worsted weight merino, which is really, really not lofty, especially when it's also worsted spun. The ideal answer for me is yak. There's something magical about yak for me. It doesn't bother my crazy sensitive skin. I would love to knit this cardigan in Mayak's Baby Yak, which is the yarn I used for the Thea Coleman Smoke Show vest. Isn't it fantastic? But I did the math, and because this design is a yarn hog, thank you very much, lovely squishy double neckband, it would cost me about $500 Canadian to knit this in Baby Yak. That's not to say that it wouldn't be worth it. It would be an absolutely exquisite piece, I'm sure. But because I'm not 100% sure whether this particular style is going to work for me, I'm not prepared to shell out quite that much of an investment on something that's a bit of a question mark. I have thought of a reasonable alternative, and although it's not itch-free for me, that alternative would be John Arbon Harvest Hues worsted. I reviewed the construction, and what I could do is intarsia a different non-itchy yarn into the collar facings. So the underside of the collar and the band, which would be the parts touching my skin, would be in a yarn that won't scratch me. I have enough of the John Arbon, albeit in 3 colors, so I'd have to color block a bit to do the whole sweater. And then I would need something for the facing. I'm thinking maybe the Illimani Sabri 2 that I used for my ranunculus. This yarn is a mostly cotton blend chainette. It would knit up to the same gauge as the John Arbon, and I think it would be perfect as the facing. No itch here. Now, I think this design is amazing, so why hasn't it had more uptake? Here are some possible reasons. Number 1, it's hard. This is not going to be a happy knit for a newer knitter. There is a need to focus on many at the same time parts. There are lots of things going on at once. One of the ravelers called it a knitter's knit, and I think that's a really good description. However, also, many of the projects say how interesting it is to knit. New techniques, always something moving and changing and happening. Absolutely no long stretches of boring stockinette. So if you're a curious, process-leaning knitter, this is likely to be your wheelhouse. That factor alone is going to narrow down the market for this design considerably. Second, what I talked about before, that lack of visuals for the larger sizes. This is a lot of yarn, time, and brain power to gamble on something that could potentially turn out to be a $500 potato sack. And the third reason is the price. It's $16 US, which is almost $23 Canadian. Now, I get it. That is for sure the higher end of what a pattern generally costs these days. But Oscar, rude. But this is an unbelievably well thought out pattern. Like I said, this pattern is not for novice knitters, but not only are there detailed descriptions of the construction, both overall and as you work through sections, there are drawings to illustrate exactly what's going on. Every single step. Aside from Tin Can Knits, I have never seen anything this detailed before. And with 11 sizes, those long lists of numbers can be overwhelming. So they took all the numbers and put them into an easy to read table. You just highlight your column or columns if you're doing some size shifting, and then plug those numbers into the written instructions above. So smart. I know how much work and tech editing went into this pattern, and I don't begrudge that price tag one bit. And I totally understand that it might be out of some folks' budgets, which is unfortunate. But as long as the value is there, I don't have a problem with designers charging a fair rate for their work. Now, despite all of those issues I just talked about, I really want to knit this sweater. I don't even care that much that the style might not suit me. If it doesn't work out, I will rehome it to the right human if that happens. If I do knit it, I'll be sure to have a follow-up on it in a future Knit List episode and let you know how it went. And last but very, very not least is Lamaline by Jennifer Beal. I am absolutely enamored with this designer. She has been on the Knit List before. She currently lives in Newfoundland in Canada on the Avalon Peninsula. I was privileged enough to be able to visit Newfoundland about a year and a half ago. It is amazing. If you get a chance, go there. And Jennifer grew up in the very area in which I live right now here on Vancouver Island. How cool is that? We've even chatted about my little nearby town. She is crazy smart. She has a bachelor's degree in physics, a master's in oceanography, and a doctorate in atmospheric science. She's been designing for about 6 years and has 84 designs in her portfolio. Lots of intricate color work, often combined with fun textures and always clever constructions. Her designs have and will show up on more episodes of the Knit List. This is one of her earlier ones called Lamaline or Lamaline. It looks like just another combination of stocking stitch and bordered color work. But what if I told you all the color work in this design is knit in the round? Right? What the? Here's how it goes. Each full right and left side are knit bottom up in one piece to the armholes and then split for the front and back uppers. Then the shoulders are joined with a 3-needle bind off. After that, the color work band is picked up and worked in the round around the neck, front, bottom, and back up the center back with mitered corners at the hem edges and the back neck. All the joins are done with a 3-needle bind off. You can feel the system's thinking in it. Each step sets up the next step. And the fact that Jennifer has a physics background makes me irrationally giddy. I am giddy just the right amount. Thank you very much. I think the only mod I would make when I knit this, is to knit the sleeve a 3/4 length so that the tab up variation is a bit tidier. If you take a close look at the sleeve, you can see that the sleeve has a deep slit and a button closure. That deep slit is there so that you can roll it up and take a tab that you create and attach on the inside, swing it around, and button that rolled sleeve up. I just love this detail. It's something you rarely find in a knitted design. The pattern uses a Norwegian wool fingering yarn called Solji, and I happen to know that you can also buy this yarn from my pal at Your Next Knit. But I just happen to have on hand this yarn from Ancient Arts called Lasco, which is also a fingering. This is a blend of Manx, Loetan, and Puntas Arenas wool. And then I ordered this Mayo Tweed Supreme from Your Next Knit to complement it for the color work. There aren't a ton of projects considering it's a 6-year-old design, but I can understand how many knitters could be nervous about this construction. I feel like this would make a really fun knit along, maybe with some walkthroughs of the trickier parts. What do you think? It's $12 Canadian, worth every penny. You will see this in my wardrobe someday. What I find really interesting about all 4 of these is that none of them are trying to overwhelm you. They're not complicated for the sake of being complicated. They're just thoughtful. And once I started noticing that, the fabric choices, the shaping, the finishing, I couldn't stop noticing it. Now, complicated and intelligent are not the same thing. And I think I'm becoming increasingly drawn to intelligent knit design. Well, let's not get carried away. And yay for me, I was able to stash shop for 3 of these and only needed to click shop for 1 of them, plus that little border boost for Lamaline. I would love to know which one of these felt the smartest to you. Are there patterns you've come across that look simple at first glance, but secretly are very well constructed? Put them in the comments. I want to see them. And if you enjoyed this kind of pattern deep dive, where we're not just looking at the pretty pictures, but actually reading between the lines, let me know if there are other pattern categories you'd like me to explore in the Knit List series. And if you had the bestest time hanging out with Oscar and I today, feel free to boop that like button, subscribe, forward, all that usual stuff. I say goodbye. Oscar says goodbye. Keep those needles clicking and knit your joy. Bye.